Reported by John Chancellor.
Good evening. Senator James Buckley of New York, a Republican and a nationally known conservative, today called on President Nixon to resign because of Watergate. Buckley said regardless of innocence or guilt, the president should resign to resolve the unparalleled national crisis, which Buckley described as the Watergate swamp. Buckley is the second Republican senator to call for Mr. Nixon's resignation. Edward Brooke of Massachusetts, a liberal, did so last year. But there are indications that some other conservative senators may stop supporting the president this week. Here's the story on Senator Buckley from Catherine Mackin.
Buckley's announcement hit like a bombshell. His decision had not been rumored. He had purposely not confided in his fellow senators to avoid premature talk. Buckley said it was the most difficult decision he's ever had to make, but he had to do it because of the national interest.
I propose an extraordinary act of statesmanship and courage, an act at once noble and heartbreaking, at once serving the greater interests of the nation, the institution of the presidency, and the stated goals for which he so successfully campaigned. That act is Richard Nixon's own voluntary resignation as President of the United States.
The President is absolutely free of...
He was asked if he would want the president to resign, even if he were convinced the president is innocent.
I would still be calling for his resignation, and this gets to the central point of what I've been trying to say. I believe that the dissatisfaction, the lack of credibility has been so eroded that it is impossible to put the pieces back again. It is impossible to restore that moral authority in the presidency that I think in these difficult times is essential to the welfare of the country.
Other Republican senators reportedly share many of Senator Buckley's views, but as one of them told me, these senators are not yet ready to say publicly what they are confiding in each other privately, and that is that for the good of the country and the good of the Republican Party, the president should resign. Catherine Mackin, NBC News at the Capitol.
Senator Barry Goldwater, the best known of the Senate conservative Republicans, said he did not join with Buckley at this time, and added that if there is criminal evidence against the president, he will support the Buckley proposal. Hugh Scott, the leader of the Senate Republicans, said Buckley's statement was that of a very conscientious and very honorable senator. George Bush, the Republican national chairman, said resignation is a non-answer. Bush said, let the system do its work. Let the Judiciary Committee promptly do its work. Governor Ronald Reagan said he doesn't think the president is guilty and that he shouldn't resign, that the president shouldn't be pressured into resignation, even, said Reagan, by an impeachment trial in the Senate. And Vice President Ford said he does not agree with Buckley's statement that the president should resign. Here's that story from Ron Nessing.
Mr. Ford first refused comment, but after talking to the White House and spotting reporters waiting by his car, he agreed to a news conference. He said President Nixon should not resign.
I hope no Republican wants the president to resign for political expediency, and I hope that he won't. The charges are either true or untrue, and the evidence does not sustain the validity of the charges today. I think it's of great importance that in this kind of a serious matter that we do carry out the prescribed procedure set forth in the Constitution to determine whether one of our fellow citizens is innocent or guilty. And for the president to resign because he's being hounded, it seems to me would be unfortunate. I would rather have the procedure, as painful as it might be, carried out as the Constitution prescribed.
Mr. Ford believes it would be disruptive to force President Nixon to resign before his innocence or guilt is established. The Vice President feels the matter can be resolved properly only through impeachment, no matter how long and difficult that process may be. Ron Nessing, NBC News, Washington.
At the White House, the statement by Senator Buckley came as a surprise to many officials. There's also, on the part of at least one White House official, an attitude toward the vice president which he may not appreciate. Here's Tom Brokaw with both of those stories.
Senator Buckley's statement caught the White House by surprise. Presidential counselor Bryce Harlow referred reporters to President Nixon's repeated pledges not to quit. Harlow would not assess the political impact of Buckley's statement, but another presidential advisor wasn't as reluctant. Pat Buchanan called it a damaging blow. Last night on the public broadcast system, Buchanan seemed to be outlining another dimension of the White House defense against impeachment. Buchanan was asked by Bill Moyers what kind of a president he thought Gerald Ford would make if Mr. Nixon were removed from office.
Gerald Ford would make a conscientious effort to continue the policies of the president. I like the vice president. I admire him. I think he's a man of competence, ability, but I do not think he has the knowledge or range or capacity that the president currently has to conduct American foreign policy. So that's one of the reasons that I feel impeachment would really be genuinely harmful to the interests of the United States.
Buchanan said he thought Congress must take his line of reasoning into consideration as well as impeachable offenses, adding that he didn't expect impeachment in any event. Tom Brokaw, NBC News at the White House.
President Nixon left Washington today for Houston, Texas, the next stop in his campaign to get his case across to the country.